What is union list? What is state list? What is concurrent list? Yeah, very good, Abhinan. Both union and states have equal influence in what? Both union and state have what? What kind of an influence? They both can formulate a policy or a law in few areas. Okay. Now, if you are asking me the example of a concurrent list, can you state few of the examples? But that more than that, say education. Okay, it can be one priority. Forest can be one another priority. Okay. Uh, then say labor employment guarantee schemes. You have heard about MGNREGA. Yeah. Can you expand that? MGNREGA. Mahatma Gandhi National
Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Act.
Guarantee Act. Okay, it is the world's largest employability act which has been accorded by World Bank. And you know, like all the states in India formulate the same, and at least 100 days of employability is guaranteed to the persons working in informal sector, right? So such kind of policies, whether it say we are laying a factory in a state, but the state doesn't have the adequate resources with them to build this uh, say the factory. Okay, and some foreign collaboration comes in a state like Bihar or the provincial areas of Uttarakhand, Uttaranchal. Here the state government doesn't have much of resources, revenue resources to supplement their development activities. Say even if it is a rail, electricity project as well. If they are very poor states, then the central government comes into picture and funds most of the activities needed for the development programs. Okay, so if you are particularly looking onto the northeastern states of our country, of course, say it is a pattern of 90-10 which is practiced. Okay. So 90% of the funds required for development projects are being given by the central government. Only 10% is taken by the state which is concerned with this development project as well. Okay. So these are the few examples which I quoted down. Okay. Labor employability programs, education based programs, railroad network related programs. Okay. So this comes under concurrent list at most of the times. Okay. Here maybe it can be 50-50, like 50% of the funds have been taken by the central government, 50% can be from the state government. Okay. At times it can be 60-40 as well. 60% of the amount is being beared by the central government, 40% would be beared by the state government. Okay. And again, it can be an 80-20 ratio where 80% can be taken by the central government, 20% can be taken by the state government. Then, of course, it's a 90-10 ratio. This is how concurrent list policies go on. Okay. Most of the funding at times can be from the central government in most of the cases. Fine. So that is known as concurrent list. Then joint sitting of parliament. Okay, what do you mean by joint sitting? I hope like I have explained it to you at once. Joint sitting. Okay, how are the bills passed in the parliament? How are the bills being passed in the parliament? പറയൂ. Meghna, Abhinand, anyone can answer. ഒരു ബില്ല് എങ്ങനെ പാസ്സാക്കുക പാർലമെന്റിൽ?
If there is majority in...
Yeah. if say a bill has to be passed with majority of votes, majority പറയുമ്പോൾ 2/3 എന്നാ പറയുക. Okay, then simple majority എന്ന് പറയും, present and voting എന്ന് പറയും. Okay, then special majority with ratification of half of the states. അത് നമ്മൾ മൂന്നാമത്തെ കേസിൽ പഠിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നുണ്ട് കേട്ടോ. Rigid and flexible എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ എന്താ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്? Okay, so in such cases, most of the bills can be passed in which house of the parliament? പറയൂ, ഏത് ഹൗസിലാണ് പാസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുക? Most of the bills. Is it in Rajya Sabha or is it in Lok Sabha? Most of the bills. Most of the bills. Okay, Lok Sabha. Very good. Okay. So if it is Lok Sabha, when Lok Sabha passes this bill, is it the final clearance for passing a bill or some other process is involved? ലോക്സഭയിൽ നിന്ന് ഒരു ബില്ല് പാസ്സായി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അതോടെ കഴിഞ്ഞോ അതോ വേറെ എന്തെങ്കിലും പ്രോസസ് ബാക്കിയുണ്ടോ? ഇല്ല, പ്രസിഡന്റ് മാത്രമല്ല. ഇൻ മോസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ദ കേസസ് വെൻ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് സൈൻഡ് ബൈ ദ ലോക്സഭ, ഇറ്റ് ഗോസ് ടു ദ രാജ്യസഭ ആസ് വെൽ. ഓക്കെ, രാജ്യസഭയിലേക്കും പോയി അവിടെ കുറച്ച് വോട്ടുകളിലൂടെ അത് പാസ്സാവണം. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഇഫ് ദാറ്റ് ഹാപ്പൻസ്, ദെൻ വാട്ട് ഈസ് ദെയർ? സേ ദിസ് ബിൽ ഈസ് യുനാനിമസ്ലി പാസ്ഡ്. സോ അവിടെ കുറെ കാര്യങ്ങളിൽ രാജ്യസഭയുടെ മണി ബില്ല് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ആശയമാണെന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചോളൂ. ടാക്സേഷൻ, ഒരു ഫണ്ടിങ് റിലേറ്റഡ്, ഓക്കെ, ബഡ്ജറ്റ്, ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ബില്ല് ഇപ്പൊ ലോക്സഭ പാസ്സാക്കി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ that is ultimate in nature. But say when it goes to the Rajya Sabha also has to accord the same, saying that it is fine with us, we are also passing this bill. Okay, അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ പറയുന്ന സമയത്ത് സപ്പോസ് രാജ്യസഭ takes a decision that we are not passing this bill with regards to money bill. Okay, ഫിനാൻസ് റിലേറ്റഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ബിൽസിന് കൂടുതൽ അധികാരം ലോകസഭയിലേക്കാണ്. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ അതിനെ എതിർത്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാലും this bill is finally passed by the Lok Sabha without much argument in the Rajya Sabha. അപ്പൊ ആ കാര്യത്തിൽ രാജ്യസഭയ്ക്ക് കൂടുതൽ കർക്കശ നിലപാട് ഏറ്റെടുക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. ഓക്കെ, ബട്ട് അതർ ബിൽസ്, ഓർഡിനറി ബിൽസ് ഒക്കെ പോവാണ്, സ്റ്റേറ്റിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് എന്തെങ്കിലും ബില്ല് പോവാണ്, അവിടെ എല്ലാം ഫൈനൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള, ഇപ്പോൾ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ പുതിയതായിട്ട് ഒരു ഓൾ ഇന്ത്യ സർവീസ് തുടങ്ങണം. ഓക്കെ, ഒരു സ്റ്റേറ്റിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ഒരു പ്രൊവിഷൻ കൊണ്ടുവരണം, ഒരു ന്യൂ സ്റ്റേറ്റിന്റെ ഫോർമേഷൻ ആണ്, ചില കാര്യങ്ങൾ when it finally goes to the രാജ്യസഭ. ഇപ്പൊ നോക്കോളൂ, നമുക്ക് സിറ്റിസൺഷിപ്പ് അമെന്റ്മെന്റ് ബില്ല് കൂടുതലും അവിടെ അധികാരം ലോക്സഭയ്ക്ക് തന്നെയാണ്. ഓക്കെ, എന്നാലും ഫൈനലി പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത് ഇപ്പൊ രാജ്യസഭയുടെയും കൂടി അപ്രൂവൽ ഇല്ല എന്ന് വെക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത്, ഓക്കെ, ടെററിസം റിലേറ്റഡ് ആക്ട് രാജ്യത്തെ മൊത്തം സംബന്ധിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ബില്ലാണ്. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ അവിടെ രണ്ട് സഭകളും യുനാനിമസ്ലി നിന്ന് പാസ്സാക്കേണ്ട ഒരു ബില്ലാണ്. ഓക്കെ, സോ ലോക്സഭ ഒരു അക്കോർഡൻസ് തരുന്നുണ്ട് എന്നാൽ രാജ്യസഭ തരുന്നില്ല. അപ്പൊ എന്തായി? ഒരു ഡെഡ് ലോക്ക് ആയി. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ ഏകദേശം ഒരു 6 weeks വരെ ചിലപ്പോൾ ഈ ബില്ലിനെ നോക്കി നിൽക്കാറുണ്ട്. ചിലപ്പോ സേ ഒരു 8 weeks നോക്കി നിൽക്കും. 6 weeks ആണ് മാക്സിമം. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞ് പാസ്സാക്കില്ല എന്ന് കാണുന്ന സമയത്ത് the Speaker of the House, with the initiation of, say, the Prime Minister and with the approval of the President, can go for a joint sitting of Parliament. Okay, in history, almost at 3 times, Indian Parliament has gone for a joint sitting. Can you say which can be the instances? Can someone guess on which bill the Indian Parliament had conducted joint sitting? ഗസ് നടത്തി നോക്കൂ. One is, say,
Dowry prohibition.
Yeah, very good. Dowry prohibition bill. No, citizenship ഇല്ല, അത് latest bill. Dowry prohibition, I need not explain that, right? Sridhana Nirodhana bill ആണ്. Okay, second.
Then I don't answer, but it's something related to banking.
Yeah, nationalization of banks. Okay, can you say at whom's regime that was passed? It was during Indira Gandhi's regime. Okay, when she was acting as the Prime Minister of India, nationalization of banks was initiated. We have private banks and nationalized banks in India. So most of the banks were nationalized, so that if it is nationalized, it gets a like we get a confirmation that it is managed by the government and it is safe and secure to deposit our money in the nationalized banks. Okay, so that is how lot of banks were nationalized. Now we are seeing many of the banks are being merged with one single bank to reduce the overload of employees and financial constraints in running all the branches which are not viable or which are not getting much of the funds from the customers. Okay, that is right now happening in India. Okay, and say in rural areas where people don't have much of say a concept which is known as a banking system, small microfinance banks are right now operating in these rural areas, so that financial inclusion, that is a term which we had regarding the same. Okay, financial inclusion happens in the so-called rural areas in India. Bank, can you say which bank as an example? A bank, a microfinance bank, which operates in rural areas of India. No, it's Bangladesh Grameen Bank is of course in Bangladesh. In India, okay, I'll just not tell it for you. ISAF. Okay, ISAF is a small microfinance bank. Like in Kerala, its headquarters is in Thrissur. Okay, it's a bank which is taking in lot of deposits from rural customers as well. Okay, accordingly, Kotak Mahindra. Okay, many small banks are. Kotak Mahindra is of course a private bank, but few of the banks are right now taking their initiatives to the rural areas. But it is a microfinance bank accreditation that is being given for banks that are operating in the rural areas of India. Okay, you can find out many other banks are there. Okay, I've given you one such examples. Now, the third thing, which was conveyed through, say, joint sitting of Parliament. That is POTA. Can you expand that? POTA. Prevention of Terrorism Act. Okay, that is POTA. Okay, these are the three instances where we have gone with the joint sitting of Parliament. Okay, now third is trade and commerce. So with Australia, we are gone for a concurrent list. Okay, then joint sitting of Parliament, and the last is trade and commerce concepts. Fine. So these are the concepts which we have borrowed from a country called Australia. Okay. Now going on to a country which is in the African continent, it is South Africa. Okay, now from South Africa, we have taken the concept of amendment. Okay, what do you mean by amendment? We have discussed it at once. What is meant by amendment? When we have talked about written constitution, unwritten constitution, three wings of democracy at the starting stage of polity, we have discussed about the same. Why Indian constitution became lengthy in nature? Can someone make a guess?
Sir, a change in constitution
Yeah,
article.
change in the constitution via amendment, for which we had three types of amendments, right? That is, say, special majority, simple majority, then special majority with ratification of half of the states, right? So here accordingly, uh, okay, I'll just type out the three. Now, a third point is to be discussed. At that time, I'll type the three types of amendment. Okay. Now, amendment is talked about in Article 368 of Indian Constitution. Okay. In part 20 of the Indian Constitution. Okay. The article which talks about amendment is, of course, Article 368 of Indian Constitution, and the part which mentions the same is part 20. Okay. So accordingly, what we say is Indian Constitution is neither rigid nor flexible. Okay. So again, when it is flexible, we go on with the process of amendment. ഭേദഗതി എന്ന് പറയും, മലയാളത്തിൽ ഭേദഗതികൾ എന്ന് പറയും. Okay. അപ്പോൾ ഇതിന്റെ ഒരു ഉദാഹരണമായിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ പറയൂ, few amendment bills which have been brought in India. I shared the, say, Word document with you in which I have mentioned about few amendments. Can you say few of the amendments which we can talk about? പറഞ്ഞ ഒരു amendment bill example. Okay, let me ask you, is GST? What's GST? What's GST?
Service tax.
Goods itself.
Goods? Goods?
Service.
Sales tax.
Goods and services tax. Okay. Now, is it an amendment bill?
Yes, sir. 101 amendment.
Okay, very good. How can we say that became an amendment bill? Before that, there was VAT, right? Value added tax. So we had to change the whole tax system in our country. For the same, the formal UPA government had introduced this system of, say, GST, goods and service tax. Okay. But fortunately or unfortunately, the NDA government was the government which came in with this concept of GST, goods and service tax. Okay. Accordingly, for most of the services which you are taken into your category, say whether it be a service industry, whether it be certain kind of a goods, you have to pay only one uniform tax for the same commodity. Okay, that is how, like, in all the parts of the country, again, where are you, like, say, in Tamil Nadu or Andhra, which state you travel along, everywhere you are paying only one single tax for a commodity. Okay, that makes GST a uniform one. Earlier on, if you were to see the tax bound areas of Walayar, it was almost flooded up. Okay, a lot of traffic blocks used to happen. Now because of this GST, everything has gone off. Okay, like you have to just show a bill of GST which you have paid and you are easily let off. Okay, that makes it very easier for us. Okay, so right now common person knows, like if you are going to a restaurant, the service tax you have to pay for the same is almost 5% of what you have eaten. Okay, so say paint or other things, you are paying 18% of the product you have purchased. So that makes it very, say, a viable thing according to us. We know like how much tax we have to pay in order to buy one certain commodity. Okay, accordingly, this was not there in the constitution before. So we had to introduce this for, yeah, vegetables nilla GST. Okay. സേ വെജിറ്റബിൾസിനില്ല, പെട്രോളിനില്ല, ആൽക്കഹോൾ അധികം കൊണ്ടുവന്നിട്ടില്ല. Okay, now the government is planning to introduce GST into petroleum products as well. Okay, few of the agricultural products. Now vaccines, it was said about like we don't have to introduce much of a tax system in the same, but we are going with a 5% tax in vaccines which are being produced for COVID-19. Okay, so similarly, like we had to bring in a uniform tax system for our country. So if that has to be brought in our country, then of course what is needed? An amendment bill is needed. Okay. So accordingly, it came up as a amendment bill. Then say we had to give certain parts of our country to Bangladesh, our neighboring country. For that, we introduced the 100th Amendment Bill, that is India Bangladesh Land Boundary Agreement, according to which we gave in 111 enclaves to Bangladesh and took in 55 enclaves into our own territory. So that's a unique thing which we are doing from our own territory. So when this is happening, we have to go with an amendment bill. Then it has to be passed with majority, simple, or ratification with the half of the state's provision. When that becomes a reality, then an amendment bill comes into nature. Okay, that is, then it is passed, then the President of India signs that and it becomes a law in India. Okay, so that is how we term a process called amendment. Okay, then election of Rajya Sabha members. How do we elect the members to Rajya Sabha? Okay, one thing which you have taken is amendment of the constitution from South African constitution. Second thing is election to Rajya Sabha. How elections do happen in Rajya Sabha? Come on, ഇതിൽ അഭിനന്ദ് ഗൗരി എല്ലാവരും പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യമാണ്. ലോക്സഭയിലേക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ്? How does elections happen to Lok Sabha? It's a direct election process through universal adult franchise. But when it comes to Rajya Sabha, there is a provision for indirect election. Nomination happens. Yeah. നോമിനേഷനിലൂടെയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ഒരാളെ നോമിനേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നു, ഒരു കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യുവൻസിന്ന് വിജയിപ്പിക്കുന്നു, ഇദ്ദേഹം രാജ്യസഭയുടെ MP ആയി മാറുകയാണ്. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഈ ഒരു പ്രോസസ് നമ്മൾ ബോറോ ചെയ്തത് സൗത്ത് ആഫ്രിക്കൻ കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻ നിന്നാണ്. Then as you know, Rajya Sabha is a house which is never dissolved. Okay, Lok Sabha is a house which is dissolved every 5 years. Okay, but Rajya Sabha is never dissolved. It is the house of the elders. It is known as the upper house. Okay, it is the Sabha of the states in India. Okay, that is how it is termed. Okay, in that every 2 years, 1 by 2 members simultaneously resign from their post and give way for others to be a part of a Rajya Sabha. So accordingly, it is never dissolved. Many of the persons who want to be members of Rajya Sabha again and again, they can do so. They have umpteen number of attempts again to contest for Rajya Sabha membership. Okay, so that is the process which is in accordance with election of Rajya Sabha members. That is taken from South Africa. Then Russia. Russia. Can someone say what we have borrowed from Russia? Russia was formerly known as,
USSR.
yeah,
Fundamental duties.
fundamental duties. Okay, fine. Now, how many fundamental duties are there?
11 fundamental duties.
Okay, fine. Now, അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് നമുക്ക് ഒന്നും കൂടി ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യാം. We are again coming up with, say, fundamental rights, fundamental duties in our features of Indian Constitution. For right now, we have taken a concept of fundamental rights from which country? The concept of fundamental rights has been taken from which country? മറന്നുപോയോ? USA. Okay. Bill of Rights. ആ കൺസെപ്റ്റിൽ നിന്നാണ് നമ്മൾ ഫണ്ടമെന്റൽ റൈറ്റ്സ് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ആശയം എടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. So simultaneously from Russia, we have borrowed the concept of fundamental duties. Okay. Now, again, in India, right now, do we have, say, a planning commission? In India, do we have a planning commission? Does everyone know about what is meant by a planning commission? എവിടെയെങ്കിലും കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? No. Say in India, that came into accordance in the year 1952. Okay, after the independence, after a few years, we decided that in India we will have a 5-year plan for certain sectors taken together. Say, if we want to plan something for our education field, we want few industries to be built up in India. Okay, we want social sectors to be improved in India. Okay, we want self-sufficiency in agriculture. Okay, if such things has to be formulated in India, what do we need in full is a 5-year plan. Okay, maybe you have heard about, say, millennium development goals, sustainable development goals. Every goal is been accorded for a 5-year term. Okay, 5 വർഷത്തിന്റെ കാലാവധി ഉണ്ടാവും. അപ്പോൾ ആ 5 വർഷത്തിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ കുറച്ച് അജൻഡാസ് നമ്മൾ വെക്കും. എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, social sector, employment, poverty eradication. Okay, so accordingly ഈ പറഞ്ഞ ആശയം ഈ 5 വർഷത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ നോക്കുന്നു, അതിന് കുറച്ച് ഫണ്ട് അലോക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യും സെൻട്രൽ ഗവൺമെന്റ്. ഓക്കെ, and this fund of the central government goes to the state governments and it is practiced through, say, decentralized administration form, that is panchayati raj system. Okay, അപ്പോൾ പഞ്ചായത്തി രാജ് സിസ്റ്റത്തിലൂടെ പിന്നെ ഏറ്റവും താഴെത്തട്ടിലുള്ള ആൾക്കാർക്ക് സെൻട്രൽ ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ എല്ലാ പ്രൊവിഷൻസും കിട്ടുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ഏറ്റവും വലിയ യുണീക്ക് ഫീച്ചർ. ഓക്കെ, സോ അക്കോർഡിംഗ്ലി ദിസ് കൺസെപ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് 5-year പ്ലാൻ, അപ്പൊ എല്ലാ 5 വർഷവും ഈ തരുന്ന പൈസ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് വിനിയോഗിച്ച് അത് ഫലവത്താണോ എന്നത് വീണ്ടും 5 വർഷം കൂടുമ്പോൾ വീണ്ടും പ്ലാനിംഗ് കമ്മീഷൻ നോക്കുകയാണ്. അപ്പൊ പ്ലാനിംഗ് കമ്മീഷൻ വരുമ്പോൾ അവിടെ ഫിനാൻസ് ഹെഡ്സ് ഉണ്ടാവും, persons who are very well known to the financial administration of the country, who know about economics. Okay, they become the members of the planning commission. Okay, now they formulate the plans and the state governments execute their plans according to what has been given by the planning commission in India. Okay, അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ ആ ഒരു ആശയം നമ്മൾക്ക് കിട്ടിയത് റഷ്യയിൽ നിന്നാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ഫോമർ USSR. Nehru, when he was a prime minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, when he was a prime minister, he was a very ardent lover of Soviet Union. He used to travel a lot to Soviet country, and from there he has borrowed the concept of 5-year plans. Okay, so he found out that what Russia has done is very unique thing, and it has been successful over there. So why can't we implement that in India as well? So accordingly, 5-year plans came to our country's constitution as well. Okay, one more thing, if you have to specifically say, that is, can you say what the again what we have borrowed from Russia? One more thing. It's a political concept. Communalism or socialism. Okay, that again is a concept which we have borrowed from the Russian constitution. Okay, fine. Now after that we have French or French constitution. Okay, we have borrowed the concept of what? Liberty, equality, fraternity from the country called France. Okay, just note it down. Okay, what do you mean? Have you seen this concept anywhere before? Liberty, equality, fraternity.
Yes, sir, in preamble.
Very good. Okay, what do we? What is our expression when we say like we have included this in our preamble? When we say this is included in our preamble, what does that convey to us? Say again, if you have to simplify the thing, liberty is concerned with which article of Indian Constitution? ലിബർട്ടി എന്നൊരു എക്സ്പ്രഷൻ നമുക്ക് ഇന്ത്യൻ ഭരണഘടനയുടെ ഭാഗമായി കാണണമെങ്കിൽ ഏത് ആർട്ടിക്കിളിൽ നമുക്ക് മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്യാം? Okay, say Article 19, Article 21 of Indian Constitution. Okay, equality, fraternity എല്ലാം പറയുകയാണെങ്കിലോ, say Article 15, Article 16, Article 17, Article 18, that goes with the same. Okay, fraternity എന്നൊരു അഭിപ്രായം എടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ say from Article say 14 to almost 32 of Indian Constitution, fundamental rights. Okay, DPSP എന്നുള്ള ആശയം എടുക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ again 36 to 51 of Indian Constitution. This all talks about this concept called liberty, equality, fraternity. What does that mean? ഇന്ത്യയിൽ വിവിധ തരം ലോസ് ഉണ്ടായിക്കോട്ടെ, വിവിധ തരം ആൾക്കാർ ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, വിവിധ തരം സ്റ്റാറ്റസ് ഉള്ള ആൾക്കാരായിക്കോട്ടെ, വിവിധ തരം വിദ്യാഭ്യാസമുള്ള ആൾക്കാരായിക്കോട്ടെ, everyone has an equal opportunity while he is living in a country called India. He has to be treated equally. He should not be discriminated in any cause of matter. Okay, he has to be given an equal opportunity in all the spheres of employment or say development, and no discrimination is to happen. Okay, because he is born poor or if he's wealthy, no like discrimination shouldn't be happen. He should be given the same accordance and dignity in a country like India. Okay, so that is the main concept behind liberty, equality, and fraternity. Okay, then we have taken as a concept of republic from France as well. Okay, republic. What do you mean by republic? When we say we are a republic government, that states that we are a sovereign country. We are not bowing down to any foreign powers in the world. Okay, our republic head is almost the president of the country who comes up through the indirect elections. He is the symbol of equality, say equality, okay, symbol of secularism in the country, harmony in the country. Okay, he is a person, say, who symbolizes that he is the person who is there as the republican head, but he is a representative of the common people in India. He should do all the laws which is most useful for the common people in India. He cannot formalize a thing by his own. Okay, he is bounded by the laws and the constitution of our country. He is just acting as a head in that country. That is what is meant by a republic. Again, if you take this republican concept into a constitution like America or say Britain, the queen of course is given that sovereignty. In America, that is the American president. Okay, he has more powers. Okay, so such is the concept of republicanism, which we have borrowed from French. Okay. Can you say which Indian ruler introduced cannon guns in India? പീരങ്കി എന്ന് പറയില്ലേ? Fire powder, the Babar ആണ്. Okay. Again, if you have to see Indian ruler who has brought in rocket system in India. ആദ്യമായിട്ട് ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്ത ഒരു വ്യക്തി യുദ്ധ സംവിധാനങ്ങൾക്ക് ടിപ്പു. വെരി ഗുഡ്. ഓക്കെ, സോ ഹി വാസ് എ വെരി ഗുഡ് അലൈ ഓഫ് ദ ഫ്രഞ്ച് ഗവൺമെന്റ്. ദെൻ ലിബർട്ടി ഈക്വാലിറ്റിയുടെ ഒരു ട്രീ ഓക്കെ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ സ്ഥാപിച്ചത് ഫ്രഞ്ച് ടിപ്പു ഫ്രണ്ട്ഷിപ്പിനെ കാണിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ആൻഡ് ദ ഫ്രഞ്ച് ഫോഴ്സസ് യൂസ് ടു ഹെൽപ്പ് the Tipu Sultan army while in most of the times when he was in war with the British forces. Okay, so we can understand that from very prehistoric dates itself we were having a coordination from the French government. Okay, but for the constitution part, what we are taken as liberty, equality, and fraternity, and republic as a concept. Now, Japan. ജപ്പാൻ നമ്മൾ എടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നതാണ് പ്രൊസീജിയർ എസ്റ്റാബ്ലിഷ്ഡ് ബൈ ലോ. ഓക്കെ, okay. Now, equality of law ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. What do you mean by that? We have again studied about a concept called equality before law. From which constitution? Okay, equality before law was a term which we have borrowed from the British Constitution. അന്ന് എന്താണ് നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയത്?
Sir, all people should be equal before law.
Yeah, everyone must be treated equally in front of the law. There was an exception with regards to president, prime ministers, MPs, okay, governors of our country. For them, this concept is a little different. Okay, we can't go in with the same procedures with regards to this persons in India. But other persons, they are being treated equally in front of law according to equality before law concept. That is, if they are committed something, they have to be tried before the court and they have to be found out guilty, then they can be punished with certain, say, codes of Indian criminal or civil procedure code. Okay. So accordingly, this concept of procedure established by law is what? Like it is like saying that if say someone has done a crime, okay, for that crime, some punishment is mentioned in the law. Okay. So accordingly, if someone commits a murder, if someone commits a stealing kind of an activity, he goes on with stealing. Okay, he has gone with say uh, unlawful activity against the country. Okay, he has gone for terrorism. So for all the related crimes which he has done, there is a punishment which is accorded in the law. Okay, what we follow is Indian Penal Code that has been developed by one of the former governors or viceroys. Can you say who is that person who introduced the penal code system in India? Criminal penal code, Indian penal code system in India. Have you heard about Lord Macaulay? Okay, this is not the correct. No, he is not Thomas Macaulay. He is Lord Macaulay. He is known with the same. He introduced, say, Western education system in India. He was the person who brought in penal code system in India, Indian Penal Code. Then again, he was the person who was instrumental in bringing civil services in India. Okay, all these three attributions are accorded to Lord Macaulay. Okay, so accordingly, this was the concept behind procedure established by law. If you do a crime, for that crime, something else is prescribed in the penal code, and you have to take that into accordance and punish the person if he is found guilty of his crime. That is what is mentioned in procedure established by law. Okay, so these are all the concepts which we have borrowed from various other countries, which was drafted by the drafting commission, and finally we came in with our own constitution with all the borrowed concepts taken from different countries around the world. Okay, so this has been the second thing, right? We are discussed about the lengthiest written constitution and second is borrowed, right? ഇത് രണ്ടും അല്ലേ നമ്മൾ പഠിച്ചത്? 2 points with regards to salient features of India. ഇതല്ലേ? Gauri Meghna.
Yes, sir. Then.
Okay. Now third is you can write down rigid, neither rigid third feature of our constitution is neither rigid nor flexible. Okay, what do you mean by that? Indian constitution is neither rigid nor flexible. We have discussed a few examples regarding the rigid constitution, right? Again, can you say the examples of the same rigid constitutions around the world?
Sir, American Constitution.
Very good. Okay. Now, if you have to take an example of a constitution which is really flexible,
British Constitution.
British constitution. Okay. Now, what is the difference between the two?
Which means the amendment of the American Constitution is very difficult, but the amendment of British Constitution is much easy.
Very much easier. That is, most of the times you can amend the constitution. Okay. So American, of course, one is written, and say British is not. It is not written, of course. It's an unwritten constitution. Okay.
And
So when we say rigid, that means at most of the times, if you wish to change the constitution, what is being written down or say unwritten, it is really impossible to do that. Okay. But when we say flexible, at most of the times you can bend or remove the main things and say you can reintroduce some other systems into the constitution. So it is very much easy in process. That is meant by rigid nor flexible. So Indian constitution is a mix of both. It is neither rigid nor flexible. How can you say that it is neither rigid?
Because Indian Constitution can be amended very easily.
No, it can't be amended very easily.
Mm.
Like when we say it is rigid, the basic features of our constitution. Can you say what can be the basic things which can't be changed out in our constitution? The basic things, very essential things. Once it is there in the constitution, at no point of time can we change the same. Yeah, of course. Judiciary is one thing. Very good. Then, can preamble be changed? Most of the times it also can't be changed. Can you change the parliamentary system in India? Can you change the
no,
union list of India? No. Again, can you change the DPSP aspect of India? Directive principles of state policy? No. Okay. Can you remove the citizenship bill in India through how like citizens are being granted the provision of being a national of that country? Again, it can't be changed. Okay, these are the basic things which no at no point of view can you can change those concepts which are mentioned regarding the same in the Indian constitution. Okay, but other than that, what is not mentioned as basic in nature in the Indian constitution. Other than that, you can amend that within the ambit of Article 368. Okay, that we are borrowed from the South African constitution. You can introduce that bill as an amendment bill in the parliament through Article 368, and again you are going through with three procedures. Write it down. Simple majority, special majority, special majority with ratification of half of the states. Okay. So as you know, simple majority, the persons who are present in the parliament on that day, if most of the persons say like if it's 100 kind of votes in what we need, say 60 go in with this vote, they give an accordance saying yes we agree that, then that is enough for that bill to be passed. Okay, special majority means if the house number is almost say 550 you need more than 250 plus, okay, votes on that particular day for this bill to be passed in the Lok Sabha or say in Rajya Sabha. Then special majority with half of the states again, 50 and more percentage of votes has to be there, and say half of the states in India have to approve this bill. Okay, so that is how it becomes flexible in nature. Accordingly, you can say that Indian Constitution, when it came into effect, it had almost 395 articles, 8 schedules, and 22 parts in its periphery. But though when we say it is neither rigid nor flexible, due to the flexibility factor, 100 more bills has been introduced into the Indian Constitution from time to time after the Britishers left our country. Okay, and accordingly, through this procedure, by repealing many of this outdated laws and bringing new laws, our constitution is right now 465 articles in nature, 12 schedules, and 25 parts. Okay, that is how you term the aspect of amendment in total. Okay, so this is how we define the concept of neither rigid nor flexible. Okay, we'll have a short break, have some water. We'll come back at 11:15. Okay. Yeah, everyone, we are back to the class. Okay. Now, the fourth point is federal system with unitary bias. Okay, federal system means say if we have to say what is meant by a federal system means we have two governments, that is central government and state government. Okay, again, if you have to say supremacy of the constitution, constitution is the most superior law in the country than all the laws in the country. Okay, then it is most of the time 16 to 19 items in the constitution are very rigid in nature. Okay, then independent judiciary. Judiciary always is superior to all the other wings, two other pillars of democracy in our country, that is, say, legislative and executive. Okay, and bicameralism. When we say bicameralism, that means, say, we have uh, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. In states, we have legislative assembly and legislative council. Okay, we have states and we have union territories in India. Accordingly, administration is demarcated. Such things come in the picture of federal system. Okay, that is little bit powerful. That is federal in nature. Okay, then we say unitary. Federal system with unitary bias, BIAS. Okay, like it has a strong center. Okay, that is a unitary or non-federal feature, a strong center. Every time India says that though we have many states and union territories, it all comes under a union government. Okay, so a strong center, the concept was borrowed from Canadian Constitution. Okay, then we have single constitution. Okay, for everyone who is there in India, we follow one single constitution. Okay, then we have single citizenship. Okay, integrated judiciary, there we have said independent judiciary, here we say integrated judiciary. That is, if someone can't go and approach the Supreme Court, certain cases can be tried in the high courts of the concerned states, and if he is still not able to approach that, he can go to the lower courts in India. Okay, so that thing also has been brought about by the say unitary feature. Then again a concept of governor, where say we say president is the head of all states in India, but the president can go in and around every state of India and see what all things are happening in the particular state, and he is the central head at most of the times. So if he has to foresee or supervise the same, he does that by appointing the governor of the state. Okay, the governor reports directly to the president of India of what all things are happening in the concerned state. Okay, so all these things come under unitary feature. Okay, one single constitution, integrated judiciary, one single citizenship. Okay, so and say governor as well, you can add it to unitary concept. Okay, that is what is meant by federal system with unitary bias. Okay, then parliamentary form of government. Okay, we have taken this concept of parliament from which constitution of the world? Britain. Okay, so in like though we have taken many concepts of from Britain, there of course you can say a lot of things are brought in Britain. It is not written in nature; it is rather unwritten and very flexible in nature. But we are not borrowed the same thing or the same concept which is done and practiced in Britain. Okay, there of course there is a House of Commons and a House of Lords. Okay, if you have to term Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha over there. Okay, but the same powers which are exercised in the British Parliament is not, say, it is something different from what we follow in our Indian Parliament. Okay, so how is it? Many things are similar to nature, but few things are not similar in nature. Okay, there if you see the Parliament when it has to begin, they go and meet the Queen over there and ask her permission so that they can convene the Parliament. Here in India, we have to have the accommodation from the President of India. Okay, there once the prime minister or other persons who are there in power, when they resign, they are just a common people. No other pensions or other things are given to them. But in India, once they have resigned, they get a say pension of an MP or an MLA. Okay, so that is not in British Parliament. Okay, and in India we can change few things only through amendment procedure, but in British many of the things are brought in. Direct democracy is directly at most of the times practiced in Britain. You have seen the plebiscite, Brexit, and other issues which have been uh, talked about in the British political system from then and there, from time to time, but we can't find the same in Indian constitution. So what makes us distinct from other parliamentary forums is in China, if you see, there is only one single party and one single authoritative person who brings out policies. Okay, that is not possible in India. The prime minister, or say uh, the prime minister in India and the council of ministers, if they decide a thing as well, they have to introduce that in the parliament and get the accordance, and it has to be found say according to the provisions of the constitution. Otherwise it can be termed down by the judiciary in India, and say the president also, if he finds the bill unconstitutional, he can also not sign the bill. Okay, so such is the provision of Indian parliament. So what can we say? A 5-year term is being accorded to a person, to a party in India which comes to power. Okay, if they lose the majority, then they don't hold, if they lose the confidence of the people, then they don't survive till the fifth year. When they come into power, they are responsible to the people in India. Okay, all their actions and responsibilities, they are equally answerable to the common people in India who voted them to power. Okay, but as you see in parliament, they can speak out anything. Okay, but they can't be prosecuted or put behind the bars for the same. So that is the power which is given to a parliamentarian. Okay, but all the things which he does, it is of public account money, and he is answerable for the same. Okay, that is how we go along with the parliamentary system in India. The person who becomes the prime minister, he might be the leader of the house. Okay, and say uh, he has to be nominated as the party leader in election. During the election time, then only he is given the prime ministership. Okay, if again he doesn't contest in the elections, again he can become a prime minister. Only the party which comes in power has to nominate him. Then within 6 months time, he has to qualify as an MP. Okay, then he can again reinstate his position in the parliament. Okay, that is how parliamentary system works in India. Okay, then synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. Synthesis of Okay, what do you mean by the same? In India, when we say the highest decision making body is the parliament. Okay. But again, if you see judicial supremacy as well, why that has been given prime importance? When we say the three pillars of democracy, the first one is the legislative, that is the parliament. Second one is the executive, that is the prime minister, the council of ministers, the president. Okay. Now the third is the judiciary. Okay. Here we have, say, the Supreme Court, the High Court, and the district courts in India. Say, while we have framed the Constitution of India, we have given more powers to the judiciary. Why? What can be the reason? That is what is meant by synthesis of parliament sovereignty and judicial supremacy.
Sir, if any conflict occur, they can interrupt.
Yeah. Say, through what means? Can you say, like, which are the like provisions through which one can act against the legislative, arbitrary nature of the legislative or the executive? Say again, like fundamental rights, if it is violated, the parliament brings in a new system of citizenship amendment bill. Okay, again, someone finds that that is unconstitutional in nature, then he goes and appeals to the Supreme Court to see whether it is constitutional in nature. He says that some of the points which we feel is violating the say clause which is written in the Constitution of India. Okay. Again, he can go with a public interest litigation. He can go for a judicial review of the policy which is brought by the government of India. So here again, what we can say is for the common people through the indirect form of government, our executives and the parliamentarians and the executives bring in various laws to the country. But when it has to go in accordance, say everything has to go in accordance. When we bring that policies into picture, that has to be for the welfare of the nation and welfare of the people and the society. So if that is fine, no other intervention would be done by the judiciary. But if, say, malpractices, uh, corrupt practices, okay, violating the constitution happens, then say the judiciary also intervenes, and it is a process of check and balances, okay, to see to that the supremacy of the constitution is maintained at all times. Judiciary intervenes, okay, and it is the protector or the guardian of Indian constitution. So that is how we term synthesis of parliament sovereignty. If it is in accordance with the constitution, it is for the welfare of the people in India, that is okay. But again, why judiciary is given the importance is to create balance between the political executive wing as well. If that is improper in nature, then judiciary intervenes. Okay. Now integrated and independent judiciary. Now we had discussed one thing with regards to judicial supremacy in the previous concept. But again, if you have to further expand what is mean by integrated and independent judiciary, how can we do that? What is integrated in terms? We can't say that, like, in India, there is only one federal court, that is Supreme Court, that can decide the cases in India. Okay. Supreme Court, of course, is the apex court in India, which is there. Of course, its seat of power is always there in the special capital territory of India. Okay, that is Delhi. Always it should be in Delhi. That is always be talked about in the constitution. Okay. Now the number of judges. Of course, right now it is almost 30, 33 to 34 judges. One, one Supreme Court judge and rest of the judges who are supporting him. Okay. Now that is one system which is followed in Supreme Court. Now again, if everyone can't go and approach and say lot of cases are pending in India, then it should be disintegrated. Like when we have a central government at the center, the central government can't come down to every nook and corner of India and see to that all their policies are reaching to the common man in India. So accordingly, it is distributed via a state, then again through the Panchayati Raj system. So in case of judiciary, what we have, like if most of the things and lot of cases are there, the important ones are being carried out by the Supreme Court. Okay, then rest of the cases are handled by the high courts and again the district courts in India. That is what we mean by integrated and independent. Why again, if you have to discuss the clause of independency, how is it? How can we term independent nature of judiciary? Through what all steps can the judiciary become independent? Say a Supreme Court judge uh, says or come up with a verdict of a death penalty to the persons of Nirbhaya case. Can someone go and say that what the judge has proclaimed is a wrong judgment? No, right? Okay. At times when say the government was very ineffective regarding the COVID-19 vaccination policy, the Supreme Court or the High Court's concern came into picture and said that the thing which is being done by the executive and the legislative body in India is very poor. Uh, it has to be seriously dealt with. When judiciary comes up with such a proclamation or a statement, then again others can't intervene in the same and say that what judiciary is saying is wrong. Okay. Again, when judiciary asks the government to bring out all the required documents from their side and state that, say, how they are going by their vaccination policy, everything has to be there in paper. It has to be properly accorded to before the court. And again, no one can question the court over there. Okay. The judge has his own independence to given his verdict without fear of anyone in the country, even if be the prime minister, the president, or the governor, everyone who is a top executive. He did not, he never wants to say consult with the same persons of what he is going to give as a verdict. He shouldn't fear what can be the say outcome of his verdict. He can do it independently. Okay. And if someone questions or ridicules the same, then contempt of court comes into picture. Okay. See, the common man or the media at times, if certain verdicts are made by the Supreme Court, we can say make a remark or we can express ourselves what has been done is right or wrong. That is according to Article 19 of speech and expression in our country. But say again, you are particularly ridiculing the judges or the judiciary system, saying that what has been, say, proclaimed as a verdict is totally unfair. It is something very ridiculed. They are not, say, persons who should be in that post. If you are making such controversy remarks in accordance to the judiciary, then you can be fined, you can be imprisonment, because judiciary holds the supermost power in the same. So we consider the last refuge of a common man to be the judiciary in our country. Okay, so that is how you term being independent in nature. Okay, now fundamental rights. Okay, you have learned like fundamental rights. What is the importance of fundamental rights, if I were to ask you? എന്തിനാണ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മൗലിക അവകാശം? ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്താ കുഴപ്പം? Say like right now you are undergoing a course of foundation for civil service. Okay, the Kerala government says that persons who are from 10th and 12th standard, or say from 7 to 12, they can't undergo a course of civil service anywhere. They have to only go through say our system. They can't study anything else. What can be your reaction regarding the same? നിങ്ങൾ അതിന് യെസ് എന്ന് പറയൂ, അത് അനുവദനീയമാണ്?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Yeah, why?
Sir, because
Sir,
it's a
we
denial
have the
of
right to study
Denial of
wherever
your
we
right
want.
to choose what you like the most, right? Again, if you are prohibited by the government saying that you can't like go with this profession, you have to only follow this profession. Okay, would you say right to the same? No. Again, if the government says that you are studied in India, you shouldn't be going and working anywhere else. You should study only, you should work only in India. Then again, would you be satisfied with the same? No.
No, sir.
Okay. Again, you are very fond of a metropolitan city of Bangalore or say Maharashtra. You want to go from Kerala to the particular concerned state in India and work there. Can someone prohibit you over there? No. Okay, so these are the rights which are given to us, and we arbitrary nature of the political wing can't happen there. It's a basic thing which has to be accorded to a citizen of India. Okay, so it ensures political and lot of civil rights to a common man in India. Okay, against the arbitrary nature of the government. Okay, so that is one thing. Okay, now again, if you are denied of the same, what happens? You have studied in the last class through writs. You can approach the Supreme Court, the High Court, and the District Court. Not district courts. You can go to the Supreme Court and High Court for your fundamental rights to be retaliated back to you, or you can get it back through writs. Okay, such is the power which we get through fundamental rights. How many are there? How many fundamental rights are given to a citizen of our country?
6.
Fundamental right.
6. Very good. Okay, can you say one by one?
Yes, sir. The Article 14 to 18, right to equality. Then 18 to 22, right to freedom. Then 23 and 24, right against exploitation.
Very good.
Then 25 to 28, right to freedom of religion.
Very good.
29 and 30, cultural and educational rights.
Educational rights. Very good.
Then Article 30 to 32, right to constitutional remedies.
Okay, then if you are learning through Indian Civil Service, there is Article 33, 34, and 35 as well. Okay. Say one is regarding martial law, one is regarding, say, the laws are not equal for the armed forces and police wings in the country. Fifth is all the laws which are being brought in India are in accordance to the like provisions of the parliament, which can be changed again and again. Okay, here the parliament has the upper hold. These are again the expansion of fundamental rights in India till Article 35. Okay, so one more thing was there as a fundamental right, that was
Right to property.
the right to property. Okay, and that was made a legal right from there on. Okay, through an amendment. So these are basically what we term as fundamental rights, which are very much essential for a citizen of our country to improve by ourselves and to say that while living in the country, we are given a lot of freedom through which we can express and live by our own like whims and fancies. But at times when you violate what has to be, what is given to you as a right, then the so-called executive can intervene at times. So it is not absolute in nature. At times it can be curtailed or restricted as well. Okay. Now that is an example when we can say when a national emergency comes, when a financial emergency comes, when a war comes. Okay. At that time, and if you are say doing unlawful activities against the country, you are being given a lot of freedom and you stab everyone whom you see. Okay, you fight everyone you see. That is not accordance to the fundamental rights which is being given to you. So that is say strictly violative of what you are being given. So that is of course discriminatory in nature. But as a citizen, you have that right to go but within your limits and enjoy your rights. Okay, that is guaranteed by the constitution. But you can't be using it for other unwanted purposes. That is always taken care of through the fundamental duties in India. Okay, so both are in terms which says that while you have been given such freedom, you want to do certain things for your country through your fundamental duties aspect as well. Okay, so that is taken into accordance when it comes to fundamental rights. Now, fundamental duties. Okay, again, fundamental duties. What does it mention? What is the importance of a fundamental duty? Duties. We don't say duty, it is duties. Okay. How many fundamental duties do we have?
11 fundamental duties.
11.
11.
Okay, fine. Now, what can be the same? Few of the things which you can say, which are mentioned in fundamental duties.
Respect the national flag and anthem.
Very good.
Then respect the freedom fighters.
Okay. Ideals. Then respect the sovereignty, integrity of the nation. Then go for national service when called upon. Then respect the values and cultures being accorded in our Indian tradition. Okay, not to destroy the monuments of cultural and historical importance. Okay, protect the rivers, streams. Okay, for the natural ecosystem which is there in our country. Okay, then
Sir, spirit of common brotherhood.
yeah, promote common brotherhood. Then
compulsory education for children from 6 years to 14 years.
okay, that is the duty of a parent to educate him according to the 11th fundamental duty. Then, not to go for violent activities, respect the womanhood in India, go for a war and render national service when called upon by the nation at time. Okay,
Sir, protect public property.
public property. Then, say one is given in like total freedom to express himself in his individual sphere and say technologically as well. Okay, if, he is given
Preserve natural environment.
a natural environment we have talked about. Okay, after that, his intellectual or say technological aspects where he wished to define himself, that also is guaranteed by the fundamental duties. Okay, any single technology which is useful for the country, he has that provision to go about by the same. Okay, so that is what we study in detail when it comes to a fundamental duty. Now, what is the main aspect behind fundamental duty is that it reminds the states or the citizens, states, and particularly citizens of a country that your fundamental rights, when it is given to you, it has to be practiced in according to the constitution. You must not violate many things. While you are given this, you are bound to do certain things for your country as well. Okay. Unlawful, anti-socialist activities should not be promoted in the country when you have been given the fundamental rights in your periphery. Okay, so then check and balance formula at times by the judiciary. Everything is done by fundamental duty. The only difference with regards to fundamental right and duty is fundamental duties can't be enforced at most of the times by the courts in India. Okay, but say at parliament can bring in certain laws at times to reinforce fundamental duties. Okay, that is how we term fundamental duties altogether. Now, after that, directive principles of state policy. Okay, it is mentioned in Article 36 to 51A of Indian Constitution. Okay, when fundamental rights are given to us, we can only ensure political rights. Okay, but if you say economic, social related development of an individual has to happen, then it can be only done through DPSP. Okay, that is directive principles of state policy. Say fundamental rights says there should not be a discrimination with regards to sex, creed, race, religion, but they are not ensuring that through any policies. Okay, it is a law. So if you are saying it is being discriminated, you go and approach, but you can't ensure the same. Okay, if you have to ensure that, then you should be given equal pay, employment opportunity should be guaranteed, you should be given a secular livelihood. Okay, equal pay for men and women. Okay, everything is being ensured through DPSP's policies. Okay, say slaughter of cows is banned. Okay, protection of wildlife is guaranteed through certain policies and acts. Participation of workers in factories management, that is ensured. Okay, woman and child, their dignity and their development, their education, everything is guaranteed through DPS. That is, state can bring a policy of its own, and when it is brought into picture, neither the central government also every time accords that or say gives a note saying that it is perfect, then of course the court can't intervene and say that what you are doing is not correct. Okay, at times when the states bring certain policies in which the judiciary finds that it is violative of the constitution. Okay, say suppose the state government brings a reservation policy. Okay, according to the constitution, this state should be giving reservation up to 50% only. Now, one more reservation category or a system is brought, and the state ensures that this like category of persons get reservation to educational and employment opportunities. Here again, the court intervenes and says that according to the provision, you are guaranteed only 50%. Then how can you introduce a new reservation class for employment and education? That is violated. Okay. Now, only certain fractions of people are considered for certain provisions, and not everyone in the state is being considered for the same. That is violating. Okay, so if that is found, then the court can intervene by say a formula, that is judicial review or some kind of a platform through which, if they find it violative according to Article 13 of Indian Constitution, then it can be taken. Such is the power which they exercise through the same. But in most of the cases, what is being brought as a rule, a law by the state government has its full power, and it is not questioned neither in the court nor by the central government at times. Okay. So economic social welfare of a citizen is guaranteed through directive principles of state policy. We have three things, that is Gandhian principles are there, social principles are there, liberal intellectual policies are there. This is how DPSP is divided. Okay, social policies, neoliberal policies, and then Gandhian policies. Okay, then we have a secular state concept. Secular state is being guaranteed through Article 24 to 28 of our Constitution. 29, 30 also says about the same. Okay, what do you mean by a secular concept is every religion which is there in India can follow their religious preachings, okay, propagate the same. A firm believer in the same can say that these things are good for his religion. Okay, that is also fine. Okay, he can practice his major festivals in India. No one can prohibit the same. Okay, such is the accordance. He can't be discriminated of his job or education because of his religion. Okay, so such is the secular concept. It has been brought into the constitution through the preamble by the 42nd Amendment of 1976. Socialism, secular, and integrity were the other three terms which were added to the Indian Constitution via the preamble, and through which we can say that India is a country with multilinguistic diversity. Okay, though we are divided within ourselves because of our religion, because of ethnicity, because of linguistic provisions, but we are united in that aspect. Okay, unity in diversity. That is what our culture is. We are all Indians at that term. That is how we define ourselves. Okay. So that is ensured through secular state aspect, non-discrimination in terms of religious aspects. Everyone, common brotherhood through fundamental duties, through say fundamental rights. Secular aspect is being ensured in our country. Okay, then universal adult franchise. Okay. Earlier on, women community in India couldn't vote. Okay, through say 1909 Act, 1919 Act as well, the womanhood in India were given provisions to participate in the elections. Okay. Simultaneously, the persons who paid taxes, who were government servants, were only allowed to take part in the elections. Okay. So all these things changed together and said the age for voting in India was 21 years. Later on, when Rajiv Gandhi was the prime minister in India, he reduced the he introduced the 61st amendment and said like 21 years shouldn't be the criteria for a person to vote and participate in the universal adult franchise, that is democratic form of government in India, and he should be exercising his voting rights within the age of 18. Okay, so why, if you are saying so, because our population is where 50 and more is youth in nature. Okay, our country is a country where youth vibrancy is there. So if you have to find that democracy is practiced in the all sort of say transparency, then the youth also has to be participated in the democratic form of our country. That is why it was reduced to 18 from 21. Right now, a person who has a voter ID card, who is 18 years of old, and he has his name in electoral roll of that uh, area, then he is allowed to vote in the panchayat state, okay, elections in India, where he belongs to. Okay. Then single citizenship. Okay, that is yet another feature. Like though we have 29 states, 9 union territories, and a central government at the center, we go with one single citizenship. If just imagine if you have to have a passport of Tamil Nadu, you must have a passport of Kerala. Again, to define your citizenship of that country or a state where you are residing, and you have to carry separate passports for all the regions around the country, then it is a very impossible task, and you never get a feeling that you belong to a country, rather you belong to a state only. Okay, so to remove that barrier, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who is known as the Iron Man of India, brought this system of single citizenship. Okay, so we should be really thankful for him to introduce the same. Accordingly, we have only one single passport through which we can travel all around India, and we are considered as Indian citizens rather than being termed as a person who belongs to Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu or Kerala for that matter. Okay, so it is a practice through which integrity, okay, secularism, unity, and common brotherhood is also ensured in India. Okay, in India we have various kinds of passports as well. We have been given citizenship according to say Indian Citizenship Act 1955. It has been amended 4 times according to the constitutionary provisions. Okay, 86, 1999, 2003, and 2005 as well. But everywhere we have discussed about certain articles where a lot of provisions have been changed there and then. But we gain citizenship through, say, 5 means. Okay, that is through birth, through descent, through registration, through naturalization, and incorporation of territory. And we lose out our citizenship through, say, renunciation, um, say, uh, renunciation, that is take we are giving our citizenship to the country, saying that I am belonging to yet another country, so I can't have uh, double citizenship at one time. If I am a US citizen, I must denounce my US citizenship to become an Indian citizen. Okay, then through, say, repulsion, when if you have done some unlawful activities against the country, your citizenship can be taken off as well. Okay. uh, Renunciation, and one more is like, um, Yeah, one of course is when you have done a unlawful thing against the country, your citizenship is taken. Then you can't have direct citizenship at one time. Okay, you have to renounce one citizenship of another country to become an Indian citizen and to enjoy all the benefits that are being given to you. So five things where you can, five systems through which you can acquire a citizenship of India, and three terms where your citizenship can be taken off by the Parliament of India as well. Okay, that is what we discuss in terms of a single citizenship in India. Okay, then independent bodies. Say in India we have Election Commission, Human Rights Commission, okay, CAG. They are all independent bodies. If say government intervenes in this activities, UPSC is a independent body. If say the government or the legislative body interferes in these matters, we can't have a fair and competent system where only the proficient ones comes out for the most competitive kind of a administration being. Say if government appoints only the persons whom they want to as IAS and IPS officers, then we can't say that is a transparent system. Okay. Only the persons who have come out with this competitive kind of examination prove themselves, they are being accorded the provisions of IAS or IPS, forest and foreign service. So that is ensured through this independent body. Say election commission ensures fair and smooth elections in the country. UPSC ensures only the correct and able persons come up to the administration wing in India. Okay, Public Service Commission ensures only the most competent ones are becoming the government servants in the state. Okay, CAG ensures that the public money in India is correctly utilized by all the wings, administrative bodies in India. No corruption should happen regarding the same. So, such is the nature of independent bodies. They are mentioned in the constitution. They have been given the powers to perform their duties freely without any prohibitions. Okay, and then say emergency provisions. In India we have say three types of emergency, that is say national emergency, then financial emergency, then say state emergency. Mm, Media is independent, that is they can express themselves, they can report the cases through uh, Article 19 of the Constitution, speech and expression. Okay. So, national emergency, it comes around from Article 352, state emergency 356, financial emergency 360. Okay. When we have three situations where we have to say withdraw certain things, that happens through these emergency provisions. Okay. So, national emergency is regarding the whole country taken into one single system, where a war and external aggression or an armed rebellion happens, then only a national emergency can be proclaimed, and that too by the President of India. Okay, that can be revoked within say 6 months time or 1 year time. It can be extended up to umpteen number of years as well. Okay, if the situation doesn't improve, then state emergency, when a state loses its majority, and if law and order situation in the state is very really worse, then the central government takes charge of the state through the presidential form of government. Okay, president's rule, that is state emergency. Financial is the Supreme Court, the High Court, and the public servants. Their salaries are reduced to say half or say 20 or 30% according to the situation, because the nation is going through an economic crisis. Okay, that is financial emergency. Now, last point is three-tier government. That is, say, in India, we have the central government, the state government. Okay,
State government and local government.
yeah, that is the local government which comes into picture when we say three-tier government. That is, local administration is demarcated into Grama Sabha, then Panchayat system, that is,
Panchayati Raj.
yeah, Panchayati Raj system. At the first, it comes the Grama Sabha, then the block Panchayat, then the district Panchayat. Okay, the most powerful is the district Panchayat. Okay, so Grama Sabha is the body where we discuss many aspects regarding our locality, and the funds and other things are being given by the state government. The state government is being funded by the central government. Okay, so grassroots democracy, and this is the three-tier government through which economic social welfare of the common man in India is ensured. Okay, that has been given accordance to the constitution via the 11th and 12th schedule of Indian constitution. Okay, 11th and 12th schedule say about Panchayati Raj system in India. Okay, that is, one is 11th is Panchayati Raj system, 12th is urban local government system. Okay, so this is the main concept when it comes to the salient features of Indian constitution.